They laughed at his broken English when he introduced himself as the new foreign liaison officer. The SEAL candidates couldn't understand why command had assigned someone who zones and classified operations that had never been publicly acknowledged. More importantly, Petrov was a polyglot whose language capabilities went far beyond simple communication skills. He spoke 7 languages fluently and understood military communication protocols for dozens of nations. His expertise in communications intelligence, signal analysis, and international military coordination had made him one of the most valuable assets in Russian special operations for decades. But to the SEAL candidates in Class 352, Petrov was just an old foreign officer who struggled with English and seemed confused by American military procedures. His presence at their training sessions was tolerated rather than welcomed, and his attempts to contribute to discussions were often met with polite but obvious impatience. Lieutenant Jake Morrison was typical in his reaction to Petrov's assignment to their training class. "I don't understand what he's supposed to contribute," Morrison confided to fellow candidate Chen during a break between training sessions. "Half the time I can't understand what he's trying to say." Welcome to Silent Salute, where we discover that intelligence comes in many forms and languages. Before we continue this remarkable story, tell us in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today. And if you believe that expertise should never be judged by accent or appearance, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. We're honored to share these incredible stories with you. Colonel Dmitry Petrov had been assigned to Naval Amphibious Base Coronado as part of a new international cooperation initiative between NATO Special Operations Forces. The program was designed to enhance interoperability between allied nations by embedding experienced foreign officers in American training programs, where they could share techniques and perspectives developed through different military traditions. At 62 years old, Petrov looked like a grandfather rather than a military officer. His thick Russian accent made his English difficult to understand, and his formal, old-fashioned mannerisms seemed out of place in the casual efficiency of modern SEAL training facilities. To most American personnel, he appeared to be exactly what his official designation suggested: a foreign liaison officer assigned to observe and facilitate international cooperation. What the SEAL community didn't know was that Petrov's background was far more complex and significant than his mild appearance suggested. Before becoming a liaison officer, he'd served 38 years in Soviet and Russian special forces, including assignments to the most elite units in the Russian military. His experiences spanned the Cold War, multiple conflict. Petty Officer Rodriguez was more diplomatic, but equally skeptical. "I'm sure he's qualified for liaison work, but this is SEAL training. We need instructors who understand American special operations, not foreign officers who can barely communicate in English." Petty Officer Anderson was more direct in his assessment. "The guy seems nice enough, but why is he here? What's he supposed to teach us about being SEALs?" The candidates' attitudes toward Petrov were respectful but dismissive. They treated him as a bureaucratic requirement rather than a valuable addition to their training, assuming that his role was primarily ceremonial and his contributions would be minimal. Petrov was aware of the candidates' skepticism, but he'd encountered similar attitudes throughout his career when working with foreign military units. Assumptions based on accent, age, and unfamiliarity with local customs were common challenges that he'd learned to address through demonstration rather than explanation. What the candidates didn't realize was that Petrov was conducting his own assessment of their capabilities, training methods, and organizational effectiveness. His observations would eventually be incorporated into reports that would influence Russian understanding of American special operations for years to come. But more immediately, he was identifying opportunities to contribute his expertise in ways that would benefit their training. The opportunity came during a complex communications exercise designed to test the candidate's ability to coordinate with foreign military units during joint operations. The scenario involved a simulated hostage rescue that required coordination between American SEALs, British SAS, German KSK, and Russian Spetsnaz units. The exercise was intended to familiarize candidates with the challenges of international communication, including language barriers, different operational protocols, and varying equipment standards. Success required not just tactical proficiency, but also the ability to adapt to unfamiliar communication methods and command structures. Chief Petty Officer Williams was conducting the exercise briefing when he introduced the communication challenges the candidates would face. Gentlemen, modern special operations often involve coordination with allied forces who use different languages, different protocols, and different equipment. Your job is to maintain effective communication despite these challenges. Williams explained that the exercise would involve radio communications in multiple languages, using NATO standardized codes, as well as nation-specific protocols that allied forces might employ during actual joint operations. The communication protocols for this exercise include NATO phonetic alphabet, British military procedure words, German operational codes, and Russian tactical signals. You'll need to understand and respond appropriately to communications in all these formats. The candidates looked concerned about the complexity of the communication requirements. Most had limited experience with foreign military protocols, and few spoke languages other than English with sufficient fluency to handle military communications. Lieutenant Morrison raised his hand. Chief, do we have translators available for the foreign language communications? Williams shook his head. In real operations, you might not have translator support. You'll need to work with whatever communication capabilities are available. Petty Officer Chin asked, Chief, will we have reference materials for the foreign codes and protocols? Limited reference materials will be available, but you'll need to adapt quickly to communication methods you might not have encountered before. As Williams continued the briefing, the candidates became increasingly concerned about their ability to handle the complex communication requirements. The exercise was designed to be challenging, but the language and protocol barriers seemed potentially overwhelming. That's when Petrov quietly approached Williams and offered a suggestion that would change everything about the exercise and the candidate's understanding of his capabilities. Chief Williams, Petrov said in his heavily accented English, perhaps I could assist with communications training? I have some experience with international military protocols. Williams was initially hesitant. The exercise was designed to challenge the candidates, and having an expert translator available might reduce the learning value of struggling with communication barriers. Colonel Petrov, I appreciate the offer, but the candidates need to experience the difficulty of international communications without expert assistance. But Petrov's suggestion was different from what Williams had assumed. Chief, I am not suggesting to make easier. I am suggesting to make more realistic. Real international operations include expert communicators who understand multiple protocols. Perhaps candidates should learn to work with such expertise? Williams considered Petrov's proposal. Having an expert communicator as part of the exercise would actually make it more realistic, since actual joint operations typically included personnel with specialized language and communication skills. Colonel, what kind of communication support could you provide? Petrov's answer would soon demonstrate capabilities that none of the Americans had suspected. I can provide communication in Russian, German, French, Spanish, Italian, Arabic, and Chinese military protocols. Also NATO standardized procedures, Warsaw Pact legacy systems, and various improvised communication methods used in actual field operations. Williams was surprised by the scope of Petrov's claimed capabilities. Colonel, are you saying you're fluent in military communications for all those languages? Not just fluent, Chief Williams. I have operational experience using these communication systems in actual special operations throughout my career. Williams decided to incorporate Petrov into the exercise as a communication specialist, understanding that the candidates would benefit from working with someone who had real expertise in international military coordination. The communications exercise began with what appeared to be a straightforward scenario. Candidates had to coordinate with simulated foreign units to plan and execute a hostage rescue operation. Each foreign unit would communicate using their national protocols and languages, requiring the American candidates to adapt their communication methods accordingly. But within minutes of the exercise beginning, it became clear that the communication challenges were more complex than the candidates had anticipated. Radio transmissions came in rapid-fire sequences mixing languages and technical terminology that exceeded their language capabilities and protocol knowledge. Lieutenant Morrison was assigned as the primary communication coordinator, responsible for maintaining contact with all Allied units and ensuring coordinated tactical responses. His first attempt to establish communication with the simulated British unit was reasonably successful, since both units used English and similar NATO protocols. But when Morrison attempted to communicate with the German unit, the language barrier immediately became apparent. The German communications included technical military terminology and operational codes that Morrison couldn't understand or respond to appropriately. "Chief," Morrison called out during a brief pause in the exercise, "I'm not getting clear responses from the German unit. Their communications include terms and codes I don't recognize." Williams nodded understanding. "That's realistic, Morrison. In actual operations, Allied units often use specialized terminology that isn't covered in standard NATO protocols." The situation became more challenging when Morrison attempted to establish communication with the Russian unit. The communications came entirely in Russian, using military protocols that bore no resemblance to NATO's standardized procedures. Morrison looked helplessly at the radio as rapid Russian communications continued without any response from the American side. "Chief, I have no idea what the Russian unit is trying to communicate." That's when Petrov stepped forward and asked Williams for permission to demonstrate proper international communication procedures. "Chief Williams, may I show candidates how expert communicator would handle this situation?" Williams nodded agreement, curious to see how Petrov would approach the communication challenges that were overwhelming the candidates. Petrov took the radio and immediately began responding to the Russian communications in fluent Russian military protocol. But what happened next surprised everyone in the exercise area. After completing his Russian communication, Petrov switched seamlessly to German and began coordinating with the German unit using precise military terminology and operational codes. His pronunciation was perfect, his technical vocabulary was extensive, and his understanding of German military procedures was obviously professional rather than academic. Before anyone could fully process his German communications, Petrov switched to French and began coordinating with a French unit that hadn't been part of the original exercise scenario. Apparently, additional Allied units had been added to increase the complexity of the communication challenge. The candidates watched in amazement as Petrov continued switching between languages, coordinating tactical movements, sharing intelligence, and maintaining operational security across multiple Allied units. His communications weren't just translations. They were sophisticated coordination between different military cultures and operational approaches. "How many languages is he speaking?" Chen whispered to Rodriguez. Rodriguez was counting languages as Petrov continued his communications marathon. Russian, German, French. Now he's speaking what sounds like Arabic. As the exercise continued, Petrov demonstrated communication capabilities that exceeded anything the candidates had imagined possible. He was simultaneously coordinating with British, German, French, Italian, Russian, and Arabic-speaking units, switching between languages and protocols with the fluid expertise of someone who'd spent decades working in international special operations. But most impressively, Petrov wasn't just translating communications. He was adapting operational concepts between different military traditions. He would receive tactical information from one unit, translate it into terminology that another unit would understand, and coordinate responses that took into account the different capabilities and limitations of each Allied force. Chief Williams was taking notes on Petrov's communication methods, recognizing that he was witnessing expertise that could significantly enhance American special operations training. "Colonel Petrov," Williams said during a brief pause in communications, "your language capabilities are exceptional. Where did you develop expertise in so many military communication protocols?" Petrov's answer revealed the depth of experience that his modest appearance had concealed. "Chief Williams, I have served 38 years in special operations, including assignments requiring coordination with many different military forces. You learn languages when your life depends on clear communication." Morrison, who had been struggling with much simpler communication tasks, approached Petrov with obvious respect. "Sir, I had no idea you had this level of expertise. Your communication skills are extraordinary." But Petrov had more to demonstrate that would further shock the candidates and training staff. As the exercise entered its most complex phase, multiple simulated emergencies began occurring simultaneously. Allied units reported casualties, equipment failures, and tactical complications that required immediate coordination and response. The communication load became overwhelming, with multiple units transmitting simultaneously in different languages using different protocols. Under normal circumstances, This level of communication complexity would require multiple translators and communication specialists working in coordination. But Petrov handled the entire communication load himself, switching between languages and protocols so rapidly that it seemed impossible for one person to maintain clarity and accuracy across so many different communication streams. How is he doing this? Anderson asked Williams, watching Petrov coordinate what appeared to be 6 different military conversations simultaneously. Williams was equally amazed. I've never seen communication expertise at this level. He's coordinating tactical movements between units that use completely different operational concepts. But the most impressive demonstration came when the exercise scenario included a simulated communication breakdown that cut off contact with several Allied units. Standard protocol would have been to establish alternative communication methods or abort coordination with the affected units. Instead, Petrov began using improvised communication techniques that none of the Americans recognized. He switched to radio frequencies that weren't part of the standard exercise parameters and began transmitting using codes and procedures that seemed to be generating responses from the supposedly disconnected units. Chief, Morrison said, watching Petrov work, what communication methods is he using? Those aren't NATO protocols. Williams was equally puzzled. Colonel Petrov, what communication procedures are you using to re-establish contact with the disconnected units? Petrov's answer revealed capabilities that went far beyond what any of the Americans had imagined. Chief Williams, I am using emergency communication protocols developed during Cold War for situations where standard military communications were not available. These methods allow coordination between Allied forces even when conventional communication systems have failed. But Petrov had one more surprise that would completely transform the candidate's understanding of his background and expertise. As the communication exercise reached its climax, a new challenge was introduced that wasn't part of the original scenario. Intelligence reports indicated that hostile forces were monitoring Allied communications and had begun jamming radio frequencies to disrupt coordination. This development required switching to communication methods that would be secure from enemy interception while maintaining coordination between multiple Allied units. It was the kind of challenge that tested the absolute limits of communication expertise and required knowledge of classified procedures that most military personnel never encountered. Williams looked at the exercise parameters with concern. Gentlemen, this scenario requires secure communication protocols that aren't covered in standard training. Under normal circumstances, we'd have specialized communication officers handle this level of complexity. The candidates were clearly overwhelmed by the sudden escalation in communication requirements. Secure multi-language coordination while avoiding enemy interception was beyond their current capabilities. But Petrov stepped forward with confidence that suggested he'd encountered similar challenges before. Chief Williams, if I may demonstrate advanced communication security procedures? Williams nodded agreement, curious to see how Petrov would handle communication requirements that exceeded even specialized military training. What happened next revealed the true scope of Petrov's expertise and the reason for his assignment to American Special Operations Training. Petrov began transmitting using communication methods that none of the Americans recognized. He switched between multiple radio frequencies in rapid sequence, used coded language that seemed to convey complex tactical information in abbreviated formats, and employed electronic countermeasures that protected communications from enemy monitoring. But most impressively, he began coordinating with Allied units using communication protocols that appeared to be completely improvised, but were obviously understood by the receiving units. He was creating secure communication networks in real time using techniques that seemed to combine multiple intelligence disciplines. Chief, Lieutenant Morrison said quietly, those communication methods aren't in any manual I've seen. Where did he learn those techniques? Williams was equally puzzled. Colonel Petrov, what communication protocols are you using? Those appear to be highly classified procedures. Petrov paused his communications long enough to provide an answer that would shock everyone in the exercise area. Chief Williams, I am using communication methods developed by GRU Special Operations for coordination in denied areas where conventional military communications are compromised. These are techniques I learned during operational assignments requiring secure coordination between Soviet and Allied forces. The revelation that Petrov had served in GRU, Russian military intelligence, fundamentally changed how everyone understood his presence at American Special Operations training. GRU Special Operations personnel were among the most elite intelligence operators in the world, trained in techniques that few American personnel ever encountered. Williams immediately recognized the implications. "Colonel, your former GRU Special Operations?" "Not former, Chief Williams. I am currently serving officer assigned to international cooperation duties. My assignment here is part of classified intelligence sharing agreement between Russian and American Special Operations commands." The candidates were processing the fact that they'd been dismissing someone who was not only an active Russian intelligence officer, but one whose expertise exceeded their own in areas they'd thought were exclusively American specialties. Morrison was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. "Sir, we had no idea about your background. Your communication expertise is far beyond anything we've been trained in." But Petrov had more to demonstrate that would further expand their understanding of international special operations cooperation. As the exercise continued, Petrov began coordinating tactical movements between Allied units using intelligence analysis techniques that went beyond simple communication. He was apparently processing tactical information from multiple sources, analyzing patterns that indicated enemy movements, and developing coordinated responses that took into account intelligence factors the American candidates hadn't considered. "Colonel Petrov," Williams asked during a brief pause, "are you conducting intelligence analysis as part of this communication exercise?" Petrov's answer revealed the multidimensional nature of his expertise. "Chief Williams, in actual international operations, communication coordinator must also serve as intelligence analyst. Effective coordination requires understanding not just what Allied forces are communicating, but why they are communicating and what intelligence factors are influencing their tactical decisions." Williams was beginning to understand that Petrov's assignment to American training wasn't just about language capabilities or cultural exchange. He was demonstrating integrated intelligence and communication techniques that could significantly enhance American special operations effectiveness. "Sir, would you be willing to explain these integrated communication and intelligence techniques to our candidates?" Petrov agreed, and what followed was an impromptu education in international special operations that exceeded anything the candidates had received in formal training. Petrov explained how communication analysis could reveal intelligence about enemy capabilities, how coordination between different military cultures required understanding their decision-making processes, and how effective international operations depended on intelligence sharing techniques that went far beyond simple translation. "American special operations are excellent in tactical execution," Petrov explained in his heavily accented English. "But international operations require understanding how different military traditions approach same tactical problems. This understanding comes from intelligence analysis, not just communication skills." The candidates were taking detailed notes, recognizing that they were receiving insights into international special operations that weren't available through conventional American training. Chen raised his hand. "Sir, how do different military traditions approach the same tactical problems differently?" Petrov's answer demonstrated the depth of his experience with international operations. For example, American special operations emphasized technological superiority and overwhelming force. Russian special operations emphasized deception and psychological warfare. British special operations emphasized precision and minimal footprint. German special operations emphasized systematic analysis and methodical execution. He continued, "Effective international coordination requires understanding these different approaches and finding ways to combine them for maximum effectiveness. This requires intelligence analysis of Allied capabilities, not just communication coordination." Rodriguez asked, "Sir, how do you analyze Allied capabilities while coordinating operations?" Petrov's explanation revealed techniques that none of the Americans had encountered in their training. "You listen not just to what Allied forces say, but how they say it. Communication patterns reveal tactical thinking, equipment capabilities, and operational limitations. Expert communicator becomes intelligence analyst by understanding these patterns." As the exercise concluded, Petrov had demonstrated communication and intelligence capabilities that fundamentally changed how the candidates understood international special operations. His expertise wasn't just in languages. It was in the complex integration of communication, intelligence, and tactical coordination that characterized the highest levels of international military cooperation. But Williams had one more question that would reveal the ultimate purpose of Petrov's assignment to American training. Colonel Petrov, why were you assigned to observe American SEAL training? What is the objective of this international cooperation? Petrov's answer revealed the strategic importance of the intelligence sharing program he represented. Chief Williams, American and Russian special operations face many of same threats in different parts of the world. Sharing expertise and techniques benefits both nations in confronting common enemies. My assignment is to learn American methods and share Russian techniques that could enhance your capabilities. Williams understood the implications. Sir, are you saying this is a formal intelligence sharing program between American and Russian special operations? Yes, Chief Williams. Classified cooperation agreement allows limited exchange of non-sensitive techniques and expertise. My assignment here is to identify areas where Russian and American special operations can learn from each other. The candidates were realizing that they'd been participating in a level of international military cooperation that most American personnel never experienced. Petrov's presence wasn't just ceremonial. It was part of strategic intelligence sharing that could influence American special operations for years to come. Petrov's demonstration of advanced communication and intelligence techniques led to significant changes in how SEAL training approached international cooperation and multi-language operations. His expertise was formally incorporated into training curricula, providing American special operations personnel with capabilities they'd never had access to before. The candidates who had initially dismissed Petrov because of his accent and unfamiliar mannerisms became his most dedicated students, recognizing that his expertise could enhance their effectiveness in international operations throughout their careers. Lieutenant Morrison, who had been most skeptical about Petrov's value to American training, became an advocate for expanded international cooperation programs. Years later, as a senior SEAL officer, Morrison would credit Petrov's training with enabling successful coordination during multinational operations that would have failed without advanced communication techniques. Chief Williams worked with Petrov to develop new training programs that integrated communication, intelligence, and tactical coordination in ways that reflected the realities of international special operations. These programs became models for military training throughout the NATO alliance. But perhaps most importantly, Petrov's presence at American training facilities led to enhanced cooperation between American and Russian special operations that benefited both nations in confronting shared threats. His intelligence sharing program became a template for cooperation with other allied nations facing similar security challenges. The candidates learned that expertise could come from unexpected sources and that assumptions based on accent, appearance, or cultural unfamiliarity could prevent them from recognizing valuable capabilities. Petrov's example became part of their professional education about working effectively in international environments. Petrov's assignment to American training lasted 6 months, during which he shared techniques and perspectives that enhanced American special operations capabilities while learning methods that he would take back to Russian special operations. The exchange benefited both nations and created foundations for continued cooperation. His impact extended beyond the specific techniques he taught to the broader understanding of how international cooperation could enhance rather than compromise national security capabilities. His presence demonstrated that former adversaries could become valuable allies when facing common threats. The accent that had initially made communication difficult became less noticeable as candidates learned to focus on the content rather than the delivery of Petrov's expertise. His broken English concealed sophisticated knowledge that couldn't be effectively communicated in any single language. Years later, when American Special Operations personnel encountered Russian techniques in international operations, they recognized methods they'd learned from Petrov and understood how to coordinate effectively with Russian forces. The training exchange created capabilities that enhanced American effectiveness in ways that couldn't have been achieved through unilateral development. Petrov returned to Russian service with enhanced understanding of American special operations that enabled better coordination between Russian and American forces in subsequent international operations. His assignment created mutual benefits that enhanced both nations' capabilities. The communication exercise that had revealed Petrov's true expertise became a standard part of SEAL training, challenging candidates to work with international partners whose capabilities and approaches differed from American methods. The exercise taught both technical skills and cultural awareness that proved essential in actual international operations. Petrov's legacy lived on in the enhanced international cooperation capabilities of American special operations and the understanding that effective military cooperation required not just tactical coordination, but cultural intelligence and communication expertise that transcended language barriers. His story became part of military education about the importance of international cooperation and the value of learning from allies whose approaches differed from American methods. The humble Russian officer with the difficult accent had provided capabilities that enhanced American special operations for decades. The lesson of Petrov's assignment was that strength came from diversity of approaches and that the most valuable allies were often those whose methods challenged American assumptions about effective military operations. His expertise demonstrated that innovation came from integration of different traditions rather than isolation within single approaches. This story was brought to you by Silent Salute. Before we leave you today, here's our question. Have you ever encountered someone whose accent or language barriers initially made communication difficult, but whose expertise proved invaluable once you took the time to understand what they were really offering? Someone whose knowledge transcended language limitations and provided capabilities you'd never imagined? Tell us in the comments about the international experts who've enhanced your understanding through their unique perspectives. And if you believe that expertise should never be dismissed because of accent, appearance, or cultural differences, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. Every story reminds us that the most valuable knowledge often comes from unexpected sources, and that true professionals recognize expertise regardless of how it's packaged or presented. We'll see you in the next one. Could barely communicate in English to support their elite training operations. But when the emergency drill started and communications failed, something extraordinary happened. The old man stepped forward and began speaking into the radio in 5 different languages, switching between NATO codes, Russian military protocols, and communication systems most of these warriors had never heard of. By the time the exercise ended, he'd coordinated a complex multinational response using languages and codes that revealed him to be far more than anyone had imagined. Because sometimes the most dangerous weapons are the ones that sound harmless. Welcome to Silent Salute, where we discover that intelligence comes in many forms and languages. Before we continue this remarkable story, tell us in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today. And if you believe that expertise should never be judged by accent or appearance, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. We're honored to share these incredible stories with you. Colonel Dmitry Petrov had been assigned to Naval Amphibious Base Coronado as part of a new international cooperation initiative between NATO Special Operations Forces. The program was designed to enhance interoperability between allied nations by embedding experienced foreign officers in American training programs, where they could share techniques and perspectives developed through different military traditions. At 62 years old, Petrov looked like a grandfather rather than a military officer. His thick Russian accent made his English difficult to understand, and his formal, old-fashioned mannerisms seemed out of place in the casual efficiency of modern SEAL training facilities. To most American personnel, he appeared to be exactly what his official designation suggested: a foreign liaison officer assigned to observe and facilitate international cooperation. What the SEAL community didn't know was that Petrov's background was far more complex and significant than his mild appearance suggested. Before becoming a liaison officer, he'd served 38 years in Soviet and Russian special forces, including assignments to the most elite units in the Russian military. His experiences spanned the Cold War, multiple conflicts,